Coming up on Sbu TV, St. Bonaventure students will have to dig deeper into their wallets next year. We take a closer look at the situation in Egypt. Hello and welcome to Sbu TV. I'm Tony Jones.
And I'm Brittany Whalley. St. Bonaventure students and parents may want to start saving their money now.
When checks are being written for St. Bonaventure tuition next year, people will notice an increase in the numbers.
The Board of Trustees voted to increase tuition by 3.7%.
The thought of dealing with an increase in tuition is worrisome to freshman Tara Gillis.
First, it was already too expensive for me, but I made it possible, so I wouldn't even, I don't know.
Currently, tuition costs $36,465, but with an increase of 3.7%, that adds an additional $1,349. But then add indirect costs that the university estimates around $1,950 for things such as books and personal expenses. But don't forget the new student fee of $415, and that is a grand total of $40,179. But what are you getting for that price?
And ultimately, the value of a St. Bonaventure education is what happens when you leave here. The surveys that we do of students and the outcomes that they demonstrate in terms of professional success in graduate school, I think speak to a large extent to why our education may cost just a little more than what you pay at a public institution.
Even though many Bonaventure students receive scholarships and financial aid, it can be hard to beat the price of a SUNY school. For a New York State resident, tuition at a state school like Fredonia could be as low as $12,000, including room and board, which may explain a little problem at St. Bonaventure.
I've noticed that we already have a lot of transfer students, and I feel like there'd be more transfer students because, I don't know, a lot of students come here with financial aid and packages, and if tuition went up, that would be harder on the students.
For Sbu TV, I'm Erin Lowry.
Students can look for scholarship opportunities online or on the university notice board.
A so-called March of Millions is happening today in Cairo and other major Egyptian cities. People there have made it known for a week now that they want change after almost 30 years of the same president. U.S. officials are listening and are now calling for an orderly transition and free elections in September. CNN's Andy Rose has more now on the life in the middle of all this unrest.
Uncertainty is in the air again in Egypt. Cameras catch this soldier obviously overwhelmed and the crowd unafraid. Still, the government promises peace.
Your armed forces is not and will not use violence against this great people.
But adding fuel to the Egyptians' fire, the government has stopped trains, closed banks, and blacked out most cell phone and internet service. People are also finding stores closed, making it almost impossible to get food and gas. Some are sharing with each other, despite fears of a shortage.
My neighbor gave us food and gave us water and all what we need, okay?
The U.S. State Department is working to get Americans out of Egypt, chartering planes to Europe. One family reunited in New York Monday night didn't think this moment would happen.
I know that it's going to be protests, but I don't know that's going to be the worst thing like that. And then with the internet out and the cellular phone out, I couldn't get in touch with my daughter.
About 2,600 Americans have contacted the State Department wanting to leave Egypt. I'm Andy Rose reporting.
Egyptian state television says the week of protests has set the country's economy back 6 months and may also hit you in the wallet. Oil analysts say the unrest was partly responsible for a 4% rise in oil prices just last week.
The Egyptian government is cracking down on the international news media, and we asked for reaction from journalists at St. Bonaventure. Sbu TV's Christy Andrzejewski reports.
Journalists covering the Egyptian riots reported being beaten, harassed, and even arrested by armed security forces and police. Reporters from the New York Times and Washington Post are among the 24 journalists arrested by the Interior Ministry this week. And staff from numerous news outlets, including BBC, ABC News, and CNN, reported being attacked. A U.S. spokesman condemned Egypt's harassment of journalists, saying there was a concerted campaign to intimidate international journalists in Cairo and interfere with their reporting. But the harassment is nothing new to the media.
It's not surprising that happens in authoritarian states all the time in the media. A lot of people die just because they're exercising their skills as a professional journalist.
And though journalists of all types of media experience it, Wieland says broadcast reporters are at a greater risk for harassment.
They have to carry microphones and cameras, and they're very easily identifiable as a journalist.
It's a big enough problem that news stations have altered their equipment. In the early 1990s, CBS reporters covered the Bosnian War with smaller, handheld cameras.
They weren't as noticeable as the big things they put on their shoulders these days, and they also were cheaper, so if they had to run for their lives, they could just abandon an inexpensive camera.
Even with safety precautions like remaining as discreet as possible on the job, fear of harassment may affect the quality of work a journalist is providing.
If a journalist feels threatened, then the people who are relying on him or her for information might not be getting all of it, and that's a real shame.
CNN reported State Department officials told them they have information Egypt's government was involved with a journalist's detention. Department officials are expected to meet with the Egyptian embassy in Washington. Reporting from the newsroom, I'm Christy Andrzejewski for Sbu TV.
The early whispers of Egyptian protests began on social media platforms such as Twitter, but have now traveled from the web to the violent streets of Cairo.
After the online tension and protests rapidly grew via social media last week, the Mubarak regime elected to restrict web access to the public, silencing the desperate cries of the Egyptian people. What began as a viral revolution of tweets and blogs soon became a violent riot of thousands in the streets of Cairo, demanding not only political reform, but their natural rights.
I think when you look at the situation in Egypt, just the thing that people have to realize is that these people, their rights are being violated when they can't use the internet, and it's just a violation of their freedom of speech. So you can see why everything's kind of erupting into violence now.
It's becoming clear that social media has had an effect on the process and efficiency of the Egyptian revolution, an effect the world has never previously seen before, and that is drawing serious global concern.
Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they all have groups now calling for a revolution in Syria, Yemen, and Algeria.
Do you think we're going to see a domino effect here? Do you think there will be more changes coming?
Changes will take place, but in each country it'll depend upon the context within which they developed historically. In Egypt, people have access to internet. They had access to Facebook, cell phone technology. It was closed down by the government during uprisings of the past week, but over time they've been using it.
The social media have an accelerating impact on these events. So in terms of the speed with which things happen, like the fact that here we are only 10 days after this whole thing began, and already Mr. Mubarak has announced that he's not going to run again. So I think it has an accelerating impact.
For Sbu TV, I'm Andrew Serrato.
Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak says he will not seek re-election in September.
Up next on Sbu TV, campus organizations raise money for a good cause, and we see how St. Bonaventure punishes underage drinking.
Daddy, why is the sky blue?
Well, to match your pretty eyes.
Nope, not even close. See, all colors have wavelengths that are diffused by oxygen and nitrogen. Since blue is the shortest wavelength, it's diffused up to 10 times more.
Who taught you that?
Mommy?
By age 12, too many girls lose interest in math and science and their chance at future jobs. Keep her interest alive.
Know why mathematics is the basis of life as we know it?
You tell me.
It's her future. Do the math.
No matter how old you are, you may be at risk for heart disease and not even know it. Megan Sudore reports.
The on-campus Women's Issue Club Voices and the Damietta Center are teaming up for a cause to raise awareness about heart disease in women.
The Go Red for Women campaign is the chapter of the American Heart Association that raises funds for research and education and prevention type stuff specifically for women. And the events that we're doing this week, we're doing Penny Wars in the RC, and then we also are passing out education and prevention type information as well. And then on Friday, the 4th, we're having a red dress party in the Rathskeller from 9 to midnight.
55% of women realize heart disease is their #1 killer. 1 in 30 women will die of breast cancer. 1 in 3 will die of heart disease.
For too long, women have just thought of it as it's an old man's disease. That's just something that happens to old men. Well, that's true, but again, the fact is that women need to be very aware that it's not an old man's disease. It's a woman's disease.
College students may not realize that stress, drinking, and their everyday activities can cause a huge strain on their heart. However, working out and eating healthy can have a positive influence. College students aren't too young to pay attention to heart health. Nicole Wiggins is proof.
I have Wolff-Parkinson's-White syndrome, and what happens is when your heart begins to form in your body, it develops all of these extra neural pathways.
Nicole underwent surgery to destroy the extra pathways, and doctors say everything looks fine. But she thinks the fundraiser is a great way to help out a good cause.
All the proceeds are going to the Go Red for Women campaign through the American Heart Association, and they divvy it up between education and prevention type stuff and also like research that's specific for women's heart health.
The campaign's fundraising goal is $1,500. People can donate on the Go Red for Women website.
And women, we need to be more aware, and we certainly need to take charge and take care of ourselves.
For Sbu TV, I'm Megan Sudore.
1 woman dies every minute from heart disease, which claims 500,000 women each year, just in the United States.
Earlier this year, Sbu TV brought you stories on alcohol abuse on the university campus. We also did a story on community reaction to college-age drinking. But what happens to students caught breaking the university alcohol policies? Sbu TV Lauren Adams reports.
Most St. Bonaventure students have experienced a dorm room party at one time or another.
Freshman year, you come into school and you don't know that many people with houses, so you drink on campus rather than going out to the parties.
But what those students may not know is a seemingly harmless weekend of underage drinking may carry serious consequences with the university. A first offense usually means a meeting with SBU judicial officials. Additional offenses are dealt with more seriously.
We begin typically with a $100 fine, 100 points added to your lottery for room selection, parent notification, then further educational programming through the counseling center.
These freshman dorms, Robinson and Falconio, are alcohol-free or dry dorms. This policy only applies to all freshman residence halls.
We're not interested in making the entire campus dry and banning alcohol because in my own personal opinion that doesn't work for St. Bonaventure University. We want to respect students' right to act responsibly.
Students 21 and over are allowed to drink alcohol on campus, but they don't escape university consequences if they're caught getting in trouble off campus.
If they're ticketed for a violation in town, we do have the right to utilize the university judicial process in addition to what they have to do off campus with a court.
Officials stress that although they're here to implement university policies, they're not here to replace the court systems.
We're not trying to be the law, okay? We're trying to work through situations in an educational manner with our students.
For SBU TV, I'm Lauren Adams.
Students with questions about SBU alcohol policies should refer to the University Code of Conduct on MySBU.
The massive winter storm that's dumping snow and ice from Texas to Maine has left some power outages in its wake, and there could be more before the storm is said and done. It's important to stay safe during an outage, but the time after the lights come back on can be just as perilous. CNN's Karen Capa has the details in today's Consumer Watch.
Snow, ice, blizzard-force winds. Winter weather is walloping a massive portion of the country, and many impacted could potentially be left in the dark. It's important to be prepared to weather a winter power outage, but the time after those outages can be just as dangerous. If your lights do go out, protect against surges in your home when power is restored. Unplug items like TVs, computers, microwaves. Leave just one light on so you'll know when the power is back on. If the power is out for less than 2 hours, the food in your fridge and freezer should stay safe to consume. For longer outages, a full freezer should hold food safely for 48 hours if you keep the door shut. Be careful when you go outdoors to inspect for damage and watch for downed or hanging electrical wires and never attempt to move them. And if those lines are touching something like a tree branch or a fence, don't touch that either. Those lines could be live. Leave it to your utility provider to move lines and make repairs. For Consumer Watch, I'm Karen Capa.
Coming up in sports, we find out how the women's basketball team fared against 2 Atlantic 10 opponents and who Sister Margaret is picking to win the Super Bowl.
As an intellectual in this country, I am more qualified to make public policy. I've yet to find the woman who's my intellectual peer. Hey ladies, Clarence, straight white male seeks a good cook, someone cool.
This guy votes. Shouldn't you? Y2Vote. For voter info, call toll-free or see us at y2vote.org.
The St. Bonaventure women's basketball team hosted a pair of Atlantic 10 foes this past week, entertaining UMass at Bob Lanier Court Saturday night. Megan VanTatenhove scored on this nice move down low to put the Bonnies up 2-0. UMass answered with a 3 from Emily Tauscher. Kara Gustafson's deep triple extended the Bonnies' lead to 9. St. Bonaventure took a 29-20 lead into the locker room at halftime. Siri Mosgrove got loose for this 3 early in the second half. The number 2 three-point shooter in the nation later added this shot from downtown to tie the game at 40. Mosgrove then finished off this nice feed in the paint to give the Minutewomen the lead. The Bonnies took the lead back on a 6-0 run, capped by this CeCe Dixon jumper. VanTatenhove finished off this drive to the hoop for the Bonnies' final field goal of the game. St. Bonaventure defeated UMass 62-51. VanTatenhove led all scorers with 20 points and added 13 rebounds. The Bonnies then faced Dayton on Wednesday night. Jessica Jenkins hit this pull-up jumper to put the Bonnies on the board first. Megan VanTatenhove buried a 3 to cap a 7-0 run. But Dayton would rally, as flyer Justine Ratterman had this nice finish in the paint to give her team the lead. The Bonnies went over 7 minutes without a field goal at one point in the half, but VanTatenhove persevered with this jumper. Dayton took a 2-point lead into halftime. Early on in the second half, Chelsea Bowker nailed this triple to put the Bonnies back out front. VanTatenhove drove to the rack hard for this hoop and the foul. But Dayton matched the Bonnies shot for shot, including this nice finish by Brittany Wilson. Under 20 seconds to play, Ratterman got loose in the post and kissed one off the glass to tie the game at 70.
The layup off the glass and in with 7.9 seconds. Dixon quickly up ahead. Crowley's going to let
The Bonnies decided to push the ball without calling a timeout, but VanTatenhove's jumper went begging off the back iron, sending the game to overtime. It was all Flyers in the extra period, as Ratterman finished down low for 2 more of her team-high 27 points. Wilson then made a nice cut off a back screen to extend the visitors' lead to 8. Dayton defeated St. Bonaventure 87-80. VanTatenhove finished with a career-high 35 points. The Bonnies return home on Wednesday when they take on the Temple Owls.
Megan VanTatenhove enters Wednesday Game 6 in the A10 in scoring, thanks to 59 combined points in her last 2 games. Tyler Diedrich reports.
Junior forward Megan VanTatenhove has scored in double figures in every conference game thus far, including a career-high 35-point effort Wednesday.
Just knowing, mentally, that conference is so much bigger. This is what we were working for. And it's just a completely different level.
She's really been very aggressive, and she understands that for us to be at our best offensively, she has to be our first option. And she's such a talented player in a lot of different ways. She can get her shot off against most anyone.
While VanTatenhove's offense has received much of the credit recently, Crowley said that she's a very underrated all-around defender.
You know, we're asking her to not just score, but also take away their number 1 post threat. And she does a great job with it. And she's really picked up her steal numbers. She's got great anticipation.
Crowley said VanTatenhove is one of the best all-around players in the conference.
For her to just stay at that level, she just needs to keep the right mindset and keep playing as hard as she has been.
VanTatenhove said she's been able to shake off any pressure put on her following Dana Mitchell's departure.
You know, having to step up behind Dana, which is such a good player, having to step up in her shoes is a lot of pressure, but knowing that my teammates having my back and me having their back, it took a little of the load off.
For Sbu TV, I'm Tyler Diedrich.
A native of Wisconsin, VanTatenhove predicts her home state Packers will defeat the Pittsburgh Steelers 21-17 in the Super Bowl on Sunday.
St. Bonaventure's campus is approximately 175 miles from Heinz Field, the home stadium of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As the Steelers prepare for Super Bowl 45, Sbu TV's Kevin Clark explains that the bond between the team and the university is much closer.
From 1950 to 1955, the Pittsburgh Steelers' training camp home was St. Bonaventure. Art Rooney's brother, Father Silas, was the St. Bonaventure athletic director and was instrumental in creating a relationship between the team and university.
He played a big role not only in having the team be here, but actually in guiding some choices that the team made about, prospects and future players. But it's a strong history because it's been one family through all these years, and they feel that Bonaventure connection very clearly.
Although the Steelers trained here over 50 years ago, the connection between the two remains strong. As the chairman of the university's Board of Trustees, Jack McGinley Jr. is a member of the Rooney family.
It's an amazing thing that he is, day by day connected to the welfare of the university and thoroughly dedicated to us. And he'll be in Dallas in a very good seat this weekend.
Many of the great players who stayed here, including alumnus Jack Butler and Ted Marchibroda, stayed right here in the Robinson Falconio dormitories when they were brand new. But there was one Hall of Famer that got away.
The heartbreaking story is the story of Chana Unitas, who was dismissed from the Steeler program right here on this campus and of course went on to become perhaps the greatest quarterback of all time, at least in the 20th century.
Sister Margaret will be cheering for the Steelers come game day, but says she will be gracious in defeat.
Obviously, I feel pretty confident that the Steelers will be the victors. If they're not, I can tell you ahead of time, we know what it is to have that kind of victory, and if some other city gets it, I won't begrudge it to them. But I'm hoping the Lombardi Trophy comes home one more time.
For Sbu TV, I'm Kevin Clark.
Not many people from that era are still on campus, but there is at least one man who is, and he remains a mystery. That's all this week for Sbu TV. I'm Tony Jones.
And I'm Brittany Whalley. For the rest of us here in the Coop Lab, thanks for watching.